Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and today we are going back to Bob Neumann. In the Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood, we did the Thunder series. I'm not sure now which Thunder it was, but one of the Thunders series made mention of two other posts. One was the song, so I put up two that I found in his collection, the Song in the Night, I believe, and then the song. The other was called The Vineyard. I knew he'd written it. I knew I was supposed to collect everything he ever put up. Okay, I'm just not that good. I had to hunt this one down. And when I read this to you, there is mention of this, or an alludement to something that happens in this vision in another one of his posts that he did, I think under Veritas The Quest. So, before I begin, since I'm mentioning all these series, to listen to anything for The Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood or Veritas The Quest, go to talkingaboutthistandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. Since this is from Bob Neumann, it will be featured in our blog. Our blog has read more links. Click on them. It will take you to the article. Each article has the audio link, which opens in a separate tab so you can listen while you look. So the long-awaited The Vineyard by Bob Neumann. This will predate other things, and this was written during the time of the Seven Thunders, which would be either the late 1990s or the early 2000s. Bob writes, "Greeting. When I dug out the worn notes written long ago, I had no intent for any preamble. Yet the most Holy Spirit was most intent at reminding me of the circumstances and the aftermath. Why now, after all this time, this most intimate of memories is to be published? Then again, why would it bother me? Maybe because I did not learn the lesson back then. Maybe it was not the quote-unquote appointed time. Only when the pieces were put together did the answer to the quote-unquote why of 6 years ago is able to be answered now. So we now, full stop, we know this goes 6 years back and was not released for 6 years. Since I do not have a date for this, when it was finally sent out, I can't go, 6 years before it said date." Bob writes, "Proving he is faithful even when we forget the original question. It was the year after Hurricane Andrew." Okay, full stop. Hurricane Andrew. That's your marker, folks. It's an event horizon. And that was 1992. Hurricane Andrew hit Florida and turned South Florida into what I call the devastated zone. We've seen devastation recently on the news. We had that from a hurricane in 1992. So this was a year after. 1993 was when he originally received this vision. It was the year after Hurricane Andrew, and an intercessor heard the call to gather all the intercessors to pray. Bob is writing here, "All of us had struggled to rebuild homes and lives. The rebuilding of the church we were members of had one setback after another. For some of us, there was a common desire/burden to gather and seek God, to intercede and restore the breach. A night was chosen, and those that were burdened gathered after much individual prayer and fasting. In the third hour of travail, something occurred to me that did not fit into the planned quote-unquote agenda. It was not the answer, but it was. Only now do I know it, understand it. We had lifted up our pastor and the sheep in his care. We had been intense and focused, but none felt a quote-unquote breakthrough. Quiet resignation was what we walked away with. Through the years, we had come together and prayed as the most Holy Spirit directed. But now all we heard was to, quote-unquote, go home and be still. We did. Of the core of 10 to 12 prophetic intercessors that had hedged this pastor for years, all but one was removed within 3 years. The one who was called to lead the company of intercessors and to teach the basic training course no longer intercedes or teaches. We were told why, but we did not realize it. Or should I say that I was told why, but I did not understand it. And like any obedient servant, I went to the pastor and was told by quote unquote authority it was not relevant. Now I know the response was a lie. The Vineyard. While in prayer, we were all asking why the problems to the rebuilding of the quote unquote sanctuary were happening. While focusing on the problem and seeking the Father's face, I found myself standing in a wondrous place. Folks, this is the vision. So he's at the church. He's in prayer. He has the vision there. Bob writes, it was unfamiliar, for the only place I had ever been in was the pasture with the master's sheep. But now I heard that voice I heard when I first breathed in his life after being pulled from the pit. Well, I had never before seen him, but his voice I had hoped to hear again, and now he stood before me. Come walk with me, child, he invited as he reached down his hand and took mine. When his hand touched mine, it was like every sense in my body exploded. It was like I was acutely aware of everything about me. Every sound and every color was perceived in a fullness indescribable. But it was the smells. Everything had a unique and wondrous scent. Then I noticed that the Father had a quote-unquote perfume that was as much a part of him as the sound of his voice and the touch of his hand, full stop. We like to call it body odor when it needs to be bathed. But yes, every single human being carries a distinguishing signature scent. It's just that human noses cannot pick up on it. Your dog can. Dogs can smell you out in the crowd. When you're healthy, the dog gets to know your base scent. If you get sick and your dog starts acting funny, like it's really concerned for you, especially if you have been good to it and it loves you, you might want to listen to that dog. Go see the doctor. Go get some blood work. It's smelling a change in your scent. For those of you that believe in as in heaven, so on earth, well, if on earth we have scent, why not in heaven? Why cannot the Father have a scent? And I can tell you this, the Father's scent is as distinct as his person and voice. The Son's scent is as distinct as his person and voice. And the Holy Spirit also has a scent as distinct as his person and voice. It's just that to see him is to have your pretzel twisted and your mind blown. So, Bob writes, casually we walked together and came to this vineyard. What was unique is that there was but one vine. It came forth from the ground and had one great trunk that went to the left and to the right. A single trunk that branched to make two looked old and strong, like it had been there for a long, long time. As the Father walked down the length of the vine, every few feet was a branch. He showed me where each branch had been carefully grafted into the vine, and he explained, child, each branch I have grafted into my vine. I remember each one, when it was grafted, and what it had produced. As I walked, I noticed areas where there was areas of bare vine, that sometimes several branches were bare, brown. They looked dead to me. When the Father came to such, some he removed at the graft site, others he drastically pruned back and explained that there was still life in the branch and he could wait a little longer. Then there were areas where there was life and the foliage was thin. Again, he pruned back all the leaves, leaving only bare branches, green in color. There was much life that could flow through these branches by pruning back. Father was giving it a chance. So we walked along in his hand, and the pruning knife moved with surety, pruned when needed and removed when necessary. Dead and diseased branches were removed without emotion or hesitation. As he pruned and removed, I would gather the cuttings. Some were very hard for me to handle. He would stop and tie each bundle and set it aside off the path. When he did this, he told me the story of the vineyard. Long ago, I planted my vineyard, and it did not bear good fruit. So I removed those vines and replaced them. I planted this most special vine, and its roots go very deep. The life of the vine flows through the vine to the branches. and I alone have grafted into my vine. It is the life that flows through the vine that allows the branches to graft into the vine and to grow. As we returned to the vine, we came to branches that had grown almost as large as the vine itself and had produced branches that came off of it. The Father moved large, dark green leaves and showed me clusters of grapes, uniform in shape, color, and size. With ease of movement, cut the ripe clusters and placed them in his basket. With a smile, he turned to me with a grape, placed it into my mouth. I never tasted anything sweeter in my life. Every few steps, there was a new branch. Some had few clustered, some had many. There were grapes of every color imaginable, light green to pink to bright red to deep purple, so deep it was black. And on each branch the clusters were different. Some had huge clusters of the tiniest grapes. Some had small clusters of huge grapes. As he continued to harvest, I would get to taste each kind. Each was unique and wondrous. For a moment we paused as we watched the sun begin to set. The sunset over the waters was beyond words. It did not seem like we were in a hurry. When we stood, he turned to me and said, "Child, there can be no further work when the darkness comes, and it will be dark soon. There are some things I want to show you." With those words, we returned farther down the vine. We came to a place where there was a huge abundance of leaves. As he moved the leaves, I saw there were no grapes. "Look," he said, and I saw the branch. It looked the same as those freshly grafted. There are those that will not grow with the vine. They produce leaves to cover themselves, but there are no grapes. And in one swift movement, the branch was removed and the vine left bare. The branch and all its leaves were bound for the fire. Later we came to a branch where the leaves were green, but grapes littered the ground, none of which were close to being ripe. The branch and leaves again looked good, but the bunches were feeble and could not hold the young grapes. This branch, too, was removed. Next we came to a branch, and he showed me the grapes. They were not ripe, but a mold or fungus was covering them, and they gave off a foul smell. This branch, too, was removed. Then we came to a funny-looking bunch of grapes. Their shape and color were quote-unquote wrong, and the grapes were misshaped. I do not know why, but I reached for a grape as I had done before at other branches, and the Father caught my hand. With profound gentleness, he lifted me up in one arm and whispered, "This is one grape I do not want you to eat." As he placed me back on my feet, he moved the leaves and exposed the branch. It looked dead. Yes, child, it is dead. The spirit that it pulls life from is not from me, and not through the vine. It is not of me. Again, but with force, he pulled it off the vine. There was no mark on the vine where it had been. It, too, he tied up for burning, but he would not allow me to even touch it. Now the sun had completely set as we stood in twilight. Every branch had been pruned or removed. As we walked to the entrance of the vineyard, he stood, lifted the basket into the air, declaring to the heavens, "Here is the fruit of my vine. It has come to its fullness, and I rejoice in the work of my hands. Is there anything like my vine? Is there anything sweeter than the fruit of my vine and my spirit? Come and rejoice with me, enter my house, and take your rest." Now that is what I experienced and wrote then. It had been a long time since I had gone back to read what I had written. Why? Because it was the first time I had walked with him. Twice now, it was in the vineyard. As I read this and typed it, I wanted to change, quote-unquote, the Father to Abba, but I could not. When he first took me on that walk, I did not know him as Abba, but it was this first walk that began to unfold the fullness of the revelation of my Abba in my life. After the fifth thunder, I was given a short word where all this vision was reflected in 6 or 7 short lines. full stop. To go to that, Fifth Thunder, go to talkingaboutthis-and-that.wordpress.com. Look on the blog page for Bob Neumann's The Fifth Thunder. It will be in, or if you want to just listen to it, it will be on in the Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood series. Bob writes, there are too many people who were grafted into the vine that had no intent to bring joy to Abba because they had borne no fruit. There are those who bore fruit and chose to stop. Then there were those that cast their fruit off or poison all who touch them. So they are being cut off and left to be burned in due season. Some Abba pruned back radically to allow them to grow in his vine and his spirit. That is what was occurring back when we met to pray. We were pruned, and some of us were grafted elsewhere to bear fruit in due season. Now that pruned branch, and many others like it, will be checked and judged according to the fruit. Will Abba rejoice or remove for burning? Selah, old dog. This is where he stopped. This needs explanation. In fact, the story of the vineyard, it's scriptural. Isaiah chapter 5. Now let me sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up, cleared out its stones, planted it with the choicest vine. He also built a tower in the midst, and also made a winepress in it. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge please between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard that I had not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now please let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds, that they rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. The men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looks for justice, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry for help. Isaiah 5:1 through 7. That's the story of the vineyard. I had a vineyard. It didn't produce good grapes. The other side of this is in the New Testament. Matthew 21:33 through 41. This is one. There are two. Hear another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. Isaiah 5. And he leased it to vine dressers and went to a far country. Or is it Isaiah 5? Now when the vintage time grew near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruit. The vine dressers took his servants, beat one, killed one, stoned another. He sent other servants, more than the first. They did likewise to them. Then at last of all, he sent his son, saying, They will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said amongst themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. So they took and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine dressers? The response does not come from Jesus. It comes from somebody else. He's in the temple. He came to the temple. The chief priests and the elders and the people confronted him. This is Matthew 21:23. As he was teaching and said, blah, 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 blah. So they're still around because he goes from that little tete-a-tete to the parable of the two sons. And then he goes into this. So it's the chief priests and the elders and such that answer him. And their response is this. Matthew 21:41. They said to him, He would destroy those wicked men miserably and lease his vineyard to other vine dressers who will render to him the fruits in their seasons. Jesus doesn't say anything more. He moves on to something completely different. Or does he? The other rendering of this particular parable comes out of Luke. Luke 20, verse 9. Again, this is the same place with the same people, because in verse 8, you get his response to a question about, by whose authority do you do these things? Then Jesus answers their question with a question that they can't answer, so then he responds, oh, I'm not going to tell you then. So verse 9, and he began to tell the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, leased it out to vine dressers, and went to a far country for a long time. Now, at vintage time, he sent servants to the vine dressers that they might give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the vine dressers beat him and sent him away empty-handed, him being the servants. Again, he sent another servant. They beat that one, treated him shamefully, sent him away empty-handed, and a third, and they wounded him and cast him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I'll send my beloved son. Clue, beloved son. Probably they will respect him when they see him. The vine dressers saw him. They reasoned among themselves, saying, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours. Full stop. There's actually sort of a loophole in the books. If the owners of land that a co-op is taking care of pass some terrible plague, take them, whatever, it's possible the co-op can then go to the city gate and vie to take the land that they've been working for themselves, like an inheritance. It's a loophole, but it's one they're going to exploit. Okay, this is the loophole they're going to exploit. So Luke 20:15. So they cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do to them? This time we have Jesus answering. He will come and destroy those vine dressers and give the vineyard to others. Now when they heard them, they said, certainly not. The they, I put in the rest of that verse because the they are the chief priests and the elders. They knew this was a barb at them. They were the vine dressers. They were the vineyard keepers. But we need to go into John 15, and then we find out about the vineyard itself. Remember in the vision that Bob says this was a huge vine split into right and left halves. I am the true vine, and my Father is the keeper of the vineyard. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes to make it even more fruitful. Oh, and then he goes down to verse 5. I am the vine, and you are the branches. The one who remains in me, and I in him, will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is for my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, proving yourselves to be my disciples. Who was Jesus spoken over by the Father, but my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased? Jesus is the great ancient vine, like a tree trunk. But why does it go off into a split? Simple. Because the vineyard has a second identity. It's called the sheepfold, or the flock. Just like a vineyard's clusters of grapes, so are groups of sheep within a flock on the landscape. It's imagery, but the images are one and the same. The branches are us. The fruit is what the Spirit is doing, showing the glory of God through us to the credit and pleasure of the Father. So that's the answer to the vineyard. We are the sheep. So, John 10, starting at verse 7, Jesus said unto them, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. But a hireling, He who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he's a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. The reason why it's split into two, John 10:16. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Okay, graphs. And again, we're now going to look at the writing of Paul. And he talks about Israel's rejection not being final. Romans 11:11, I say then, have they stumbled and they should fall, that they should fall? Certainly not. But through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles. Now, if their fall, the falling of Israel, the vineyard that is destroyed in 70 A.D. is the men of Judah. In Isaiah, he says, the men of Judah are his vineyard. So, in 70 A.D., when all of that is destroyed, that vineyard is destroyed. Why? Because the new vine had been implanted on the roots into the ground of the old, outside the temple, but upon the mount which shares the temple, the city, and the place of his crucifixion, was the beloved Son, cast out of the vineyard, cast out of Judaism, cast out of temple, cast out of the city, to the hands of Romans. Do you get it? And so then he came and destroyed the vineyard. That vineyard. But he doesn't leave himself without one. He gives himself another vineyard. Or should I say, a different vine stock. For what the law couldn't do, the Son does. So now if their fall is riches to the world, and their failure riches to the Gentiles, how much more will their fullness be? That is, when Jewish people, the Jewish people, that whole system comes to Messiah. It's a promise. The mechanisms of how it will be kept have not been revealed because it hasn't happened yet. You have Messianic Jews, but I could go in a whole other direction with this, but I have to stay on the scriptures. So verse 13, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my ministry. If by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, and save some of them. Saul, was a Jew. For if their being cast away is the reconciling of the world, what will be their acceptance but life from the dead? For if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. I am the vine. The roots are sunk into the union of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, because Jesus is the vine, and that vine is God himself. And so the Father vine dresses this. That's right. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you being wild olive tree, wait, not a wild vine, but a wild olive tree, are going to be grafted into a vine, a grape vine, in a grape arbor. Jesus is the great grape arbor, the master vine, from which all others flow. Do you get it? But we're a wild olive tree. We're not even grapes. What the flip, God? What's wrong with you? You're taking from another kind of tree and sticking it in your vine. You've been around too long, God. You've lost your mind. God, help me. Please don't kill me. Thank you. So if you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them became a partaker of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Wait, what? What olive tree? What olive tree? This is a vine. This is a grapevine, right? How does Paul go from grapevine to olive tree? The vine gives you wine. The olive tree gives you oil. Touch not the oil and the wine. The wine is the blood, the love of God. The oil is semica of the Spirit, the indwelling, infilling of the Spirit, the extra cruse of oil to keep your lamp lit so you stay as light in darkness, awaiting the sound of the call of the bridegroom to come and get his bride. Oh, and the images just converge. Even within the bride branch body, there is the bride who is bride alone at the very heart of the body. Okay. 18. Do not boast against the branches, but if you do boast, remember that you do not support the root. The root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. This is a Gentile talking. Well said, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be haughty, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he may not spare you either. Consider therefore then the goodness and severity of God. Of those who fell, severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. But if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these who are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree again? He talks about the olive because he's talking about that which is in the vine. This is the strangest grape thing you've ever seen. Call it a grolive, grapolive, olive grape? I don't know. It's a hybridization here. Because the two images are the same. The grapes are the fruit of the Spirit. The olive bears the oil of the Spirit. It's the same thing, and olives are as much a cluster as grapes are. Oh, so there you have it. And the reason why he would not allow certain things to be touched is because it was pulling life from something that was not of him. And then there's that which was all leaf with no fruit. And it takes us immediately to the fig tree that Jesus goes to, paws through the leaves, finds no fruit, and goes, you'll never be producing fruit for me for anyone to eat from again. Curses it, and it dries up to the root, and it withers away. Do you get it? And so I have given you The Vineyard by Bob Neumann. And that'll do it for this episode of This and That. Until then,